A week after my rock climbing accident, when I was being transferred from the ICU up to the trauma unit, I received a beautiful note wishing me a speedy recovery, along with a generous DoorDash certificate for my family to use. This touched me so much because it was sent by somebody I had only really talked to once when I had interviewed her on my podcast. Fast forward a year and a half later, and it's me wishing her a speedy recovery. This wonderful woman is Elise Caffee, and last week she was in a terrible accident in Cancun where the car she was in was struck by an asphalt truck of all things. They were able to rescue her from the accident, but she is severely burned and is now back home in Utah in the hospital in critical condition. Over the next several days, she's undergoing surgeries to remove the asphalt and try and heal her body. They're asking that instead we send donations to the family of the driver who was killed in the accident. As you'll see from the interview that I'm going to share today, this is exactly Elise's MO, to extend friendship and love to everyone she meets. This is obvious from the thousands of people who are praying for and supporting Elise and her family at this time. Welcome to the Family Lab podcast. Today, I'm so honored to share this interview I had with Elise Caffee in October of 2022 as we all continue to pray for and support her and her family. You may know Elise Caffee as a travel writer with a blog and Instagram account called 3 Kids Travel, where she gives tips and tricks and stories of their worldwide adventures. She's also the co-founder of a publication company called Jumel Press. But I actually had Elise on the podcast to talk about another beautiful Instagram account she started called The Friendship Experiment. Can you tell why we were drawn to each other? Elise loves experiments as much as I do. I originally used clips from this interview in 2 separate episodes about friendship, but today I wanted to devote an entire episode to the wisdom and beautiful advice that Elise gives about friendship. She'll share several experiments we can do in her honor as we pray for her recovery. You can follow along with updates from her family on Instagram at Elise Caffee Updates, and that's also where you'll find information on where you can donate to the driver's family and where you can send notes of encouragement for them to read to Elise. And now let's hear from Elise herself. Why did you create the friendship experiment, and what need were you trying to fill?
Okay, so I created this in September 2020, and it was kind of at a time when I felt like I was just getting back into seeing friends in Utah after being like with COVID, you're just staying with your family a lot and realizing I maybe was missing some key social skills or had forgotten them, during the pandemic. And then also we moved in September 2020, and we moved a mile from our house. We're in the same neighborhood. But things change when you move. It's funny how like situational friends turn into like, oh, you don't see them anymore. And so it kind of changed the way some of my friendships were. And it got me thinking a lot about friendship. And I've moved a lot and lived in a lot of different places growing up and was always having to make new friends. And so I always have been thinking about friendship. And I feel like it's one of those conversations that comes up a lot with women, especially in this stage of life, women who are kind of trying to still figure themselves out and maybe don't feel like they have the friends they want. So anyways, I had been having a lot of conversations with other moms, and I was like, travel is kind of not really that much of a conversation right now, which is, a place that I often am sharing on Instagram. And I was like, I'm really interested in friendship. I feel like I've done a lot of research on my own on friendship. I feel like I have a master's degree in rhetoric and composition and understanding arguments and understanding the way people talk to one another and think. And I love research. So I was like, I decided that I would create an Instagram account where I could kind of share some of the research I was doing myself and also find tips to help myself, but also other people. And then for me, it's also like kind of a good reminder. Every once in a while, we'll do like a friendship challenge and like talk to this many friends this week or reach out to this many friends. And it was almost just as much for me as it was for other people. I called it a friendship experiment because I feel like friendship is kind of an experiment in general. Like you're doing lots of different things. You never know which friend is going to turn into a good friend or just an acquaintance friend. You don't know, different strategies work with different friends. You're constantly kind of fine tuning your social skills. So you're always kind of experimenting with different strategies in the friendship arena. At least I am. And so it's not like I have all the ideas to share. I'm kind of learning myself. And I thought I'd create an Instagram account just because I like the idea of a community and getting other ideas from other women. Um, and I felt like there was a need. So that's kind of why I created it. And I'm just really interested in kind of the psychology behind friendship and why people do what they do and how people build relationships and that kind of thing.
That is so cool. So experiments are my jam. Like I do my own experiment episodes every quarter and just talk about all the experiments we're trying in my home.
Oh,
And
cool.
I experiment with a lot of the ideas I get from interviewing people for my podcast. And anyway, so that's like, you had me at experiment for sure. But what I love about the putting friendship in that equation, the friendship experiment, is that it seems less intimidating. Like I feel like if you acknowledge that everybody is experiment, there's no set blueprint or formula, I think that makes it less intimidating and allows for the vulnerability that's necessary for friendship, you know?
For sure. And I think you have to remember, as someone who's trying to become a good friend, everybody comes with a different idea of what a friend is. So sometimes we assume, like, this is what the package of a friend looks like. And our friend over here is like, well, this is what I think a friend looks like. And you could both want to be friends, but your ideas are totally different. And sometimes you have a miss when it comes to how you're being a good friend. Or sometimes you can learn from friends because you're like, oh, well, that would be a much better way to be a friend. Like I feel like watching a lot of my friends, I learn how to be a better friend. And so that, yeah, that goes back to the experiment piece. Like nobody knows what they're doing. Even if you were to talk to, there's a couple friendship experts, that I follow on Instagram. They will very much tell you like they're an expert because they've, done a lot of research and tried things and they know a lot of the psychology behind stuff. But even in their own lives with their own friends, they don't know what they're doing. They're just trying stuff too. Nobody, like, because you're dealing with humans. So everybody reacts differently. Everybody has different kind of experiences that they're coming from and they interpret things differently. So even the experts aren't really experts.
Yeah. And I hadn't even thought about the fact that there could be friendship and experts, and I should probably interview some of those friendship experts.
Yeah.
So, do you look at friendship as a skill that can be learned?
Yes. I mean, I think there's some things that maybe you developed over time. And so you're more naturally inclined. Some people are just more naturally outgoing. And so friendship might come easier for them. Some people maybe are oversharers. And so sometimes in certain relationships, it makes people uncomfortable, and so I think a lot of times all of us have some base level of we know what friendship is. We've had positive experiences, usually like in elementary school or middle school or high school. We've learned some of the things over time, but I think everybody can be a better friend. And I think if you're realizing your relationships aren't turning out the way that you want them to be, that anybody can improve those skills and be a better friend and totally change the trajectory of what their friendships look like. I mean, I've done that before. I've seen other people totally do that. I think in different stages of our lives, we do that depending on kind of what we're going through. So yeah, I definitely think there's a set of skills you can learn, but I think some people start off a little bit ahead of other people.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. One thing you said earlier was you mentioned situational friendship, and I knew exactly what you meant when you said that, but I liked having a term for it. Those carpool friends or school drop-off friends, things like that. Can you explain more about situational friendships, and are there other kind of categories of friendships, if you will?
Well, I think based on the research that I've done, a lot of times people become friends because of proximity.
Hmm.
And that's the majority of the friends that you have, unless they're family, because people are generally lazy. I mean, you don't want to say that, but it's kind of true. And so, in different stages of your lives, you have certain friends. And especially you think about when you were growing up in school, the friends that you're friends with were like the kids in your neighborhood, the kids in your class. If someone wasn't in your class, you're devastated because the implications of that is just by not being in their class, you might not be as good of friends. And I think that same kind of thing happens as adults. It's your friends who have kids the same stages of life, you're drawn towards, or if your kids are all on a soccer team and you make friends on that soccer team, when you're no longer on that soccer team, the friends disappear. Like it's just interesting to see. So I think you often will have situational friends like related to proximity, but then you also maybe have certain groups that you're part of,
Uh-huh.
maybe like a church group, or I don't know. I make a lot of my friends at the gym, so a gym group, or a lot of people make friends through work. That's one of the main places people, like in the US, make friends through work. Some people make friends at bars. It just depends on where you tend to spend the most time. So that goes back to proximity. I think you can tie most things to proximity in terms
Yeah.
of friendship, unless it's family. And like, I mean, obviously your family can be your friends, but they're kind of have to be sometimes, right? Like they say, friends are the family you choose. Um, your family can become your friends, but that's just a little bit different. And then there's the friends that you grew up with in high school or other places that maybe you're far away from, that you keep in touch with, like kind of long distance friends. So I don't know if
Yeah.
there's set groups, but that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like understanding that kind of rule of proximity and situation, um, you can kind of use that information to hack it. So if you're like, well,
Yes.
I want to see you regularly or see this group of people regularly, so let's figure out how we can build that into our schedules, and let's start a book club, or let's have lunch once a month, or so
Yes.
so I feel like that's a useful information to know, that yeah, like just consistent regular gatherings are important to maintain this friendship.
Well, and a lot of times when you were in college or when you were in elementary school, like the more you see someone, the time invested in those friendships, even like FaceTime, you feel more connected to those people. So the people that you do see at the gym more, maybe just going to the gym necessarily doesn't mean you're going to be friends, but you run into each other more. That person's on your mind, their mind. So then when they're having a party or they're planning something, they think, oh, they remember you. And so some of the proximity leads to other friendship experiences. I know I had some friends move into our neighborhood just in the last few years, and they were struggling making friends. And that's kind of where it also got me thinking about a lot of things. And I was trying to think like, well, where are my friends? And it's like church and the gym, and then some of these social circles that I've now created outside of those things. And so a couple of the girls, we would just encourage, like, come to the gym because we're there every day and everyone's there for an hour. Everybody then goes about the rest of their day and nobody's seeing friends, but people were feeling left out because they weren't connected to these friends. And I was like, it's because we're all going to the gym. I would be left out too if I didn't go to the gym. But it was that place where, with the proximity, people would remember about you, and you'd have that hour in the day, and you weren't even there talking it for an hour, but like the 10 minutes before class to just touch base really quick. And a lot of times with friendships, it's those little attempts to kind of connect that build the relationship over time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so since you mentioned some of the other groups, what are some of the groups that you've started to be able to build some of these friendships?
So when I was a new mom, I actually lived in a neighborhood where there were not any other new moms. So I am like one of those moms that can say I did not have a group of like young moms with kids. We went to the park. Like I actually tried to create a group to do that, and no one showed up. And it was one of those experiences for me that I realized that I didn't know all the different moms very well, and they were in different stages of life than me. They had kindergartners and other things, and like playing at the park didn't work for them. So I was trying to force this group to happen, and it didn't work. And so what I started doing was I started planning different outings for myself, and then texting a few moms that I knew and just saying, does anyone want to come with me to this? Like, I'm going already. Does anybody want to come with me? And over time, that created this group, and we would do like story time at the library, or just different mom activities. And I found moms in different places through like old friends and other things, but I would just kind of throw them all together. So it was kind of like a hodgepodge group of moms who I knew who didn't know each other, but we kind of got to know each other. Another group that I had a friend create, I think that's why it's great to have other people sometimes do the groups. I didn't create the group, but she moved in, and she's just one of those people that's a planner. And I didn't know that many people, and she didn't know that many people. And she started these fun Fridays where she would plan something every Friday, and like you just invite anybody. So anybody in the neighborhood, anybody we knew, we just say when we're going, and people would just show up. And I actually met so many people from those opportunities for friendship. And usually I was showing up and I only knew one or two people, and it gave me a good chance to practice my friendship skills. Now I'm in a book club that somebody created, and I helped create a mom's group in our neighborhood, and we do monthly lunches. We have like a group meet, which is awesome, where everyone kind of shares tips and things, or like who cleans your windows, like that kind of stuff. But then we also try to organize a monthly lunch to get together. And then I have a workout group, different seasons of life, sometimes, or not life, of the year. We have a hiking group. But they're all kind of informal groups. Nothing's like super official.
Okay. Okay, that's great. So, what do you think is different about friendship in motherhood?
That's a good question. I think if I were to compare it, for example, when I lived in an area where I was single and looking for friends, you had a lot more time in different ways. I worked full time, but I had evening time, I had weekend time that I needed people to hang out with. I feel like a lot of times in this stage of motherhood, you are running your kids all over the place, or you have just literal jobs that you need to be doing all day long, or people have actual jobs. So there's the actual work balance, work life balance, or even stay at home moms. You're just trying to do so many jobs and responsibilities and errands and that kind of thing, that the busyness of that life, and then also supporting, in my case, 4 other people and all the things they're trying to do, sometimes you don't have the bandwidth to navigate friendship as well. So I think a lot of times people just get really busy. So I think friendship is different in that stage, because you almost have to really look for opportunities to hang out with friends and make opportunities. Otherwise, you can be really busy, but also kind of lonely.
Yeah. I feel like I go through cycles of that where I'm like, I almost forget about friendship. Like I forget, or I either take it for granted, or I forget that I need to be putting in the time for that, until I realize, wait, something's missing. And I think it's that I'm lonely. I think it's friendship.
Yes.
I think,
Yes.
and I feel like I definitely get to that. Now I've learned when those things happen, and the most common time is at the end of summer. That's when I realize, like, oh man, I need friends, because I've been consumed with my children all summer and running here and there. And I've been busy and around people a lot. But I realized, like, I don't know what's happening in anybody's life. I don't
Right.
know, like, I'm lonely. I need friends. And so school starting is always kind of my like awakening, like, oh, friendship. Yeah, that's right.
Well, it's so true. And I think I feel like I just went through one of those stages where you just are so busy. Like maybe your kids are struggling, maybe your family's struggling, maybe you're dealing with a lot. So it's not that you don't want friends or care about your friends. But one of the things with the Instagram account that I've been doing is I'm trying to remind people that even during those times, it's really good to try to make a little bit of time for your friends, because not every friend looks at this way. A lot of friends are just fine with that cycle. But there are people in our lives who, are wanting more interaction or more friendship. And if you go a long time without touching base with people, they start to think maybe you aren't friends anymore, or they might need more, or maybe you're going through a stage where you need more friendship, or you need advice or help or other things. And if you neglect those friendships, um, over time, it could be one of those things where you're like, oh, I kind of neglected that friend, and like that friend's now not in my life anymore. And I really kind of missed out on that opportunity. So I think even when we're really busy, it's good to find time, because you can text somebody, you can even following somebody on social media and sending them a couple of messages, or like, I don't know, drop something off at their house. I think even when you're in the busiest stage of life, you can make time for friends. And I think that you also have to be realistic in terms of like, how many friends does that mean? Like, generally, I think most people have 3 to 5 close friends. I think that's what the research kind of says. Nobody has like hundreds of friends. Those are a lot of acquaintances. So if you can try to keep into account just a few of those people and just touch base regularly, even if that's once a week, just so that connection kind of stays ongoing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we talked a little bit about situational friendships. That's one category. There are friends that you dive deep with, and like you have this deep connection, but then there are friends that fill a different need and you just want to have fun with them. What are some of the needs that you have, I guess, for different kinds of friendships?
Sure. I for sure think you have different needs at different times in life, and then also throughout your life. So you may have that group of people who have known you forever, and they're the people that you can bare your soul to, and you know that even if you don't keep up that day-to-day interaction, when you talk to them, they know your history. You'll talk to them for 2 hours, and they kind of, you can both fill each other's cup that way. I think there's those kinds of friends, and those kinds of friends, because you've built up such a history, you can kind of go like on and off like that. I have friends like that from college, roommates from college, or one of my really close high school friends, that you can go a long time, but when you are together, you connect like it was yesterday that you last saw them. I know I am not that fun of a person, but so I love those friends that are fun. I had this group of friends that we do these kind of, we call ourselves, I think, the adventure group. And for each other's birthdays, we go do really fun things that like I would never do on my own. Um, and I need those friends because they push me outside my comfort zone and they make me try new things. They're really entertaining and fun, and a lot of just that kind of levity that they bring to your life. I think that's awesome. I think you also have friends that maybe you don't touch base with every day, but like the friends that really step up when you need someone. So let's say your family's going through a hard time, or you're going through a hard time, and they may not be your best day-to-day friends, but they're those kind of friends that just jump in when they see a need. And sometimes those people aren't really that close to you, but they are just kind of the helper friends, the service-oriented friends. Um, so those are kind of some of the ones that I think about the most. Um, yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that. Um, you mentioned the needs you had as a young mom,
Yeah. Yeah.
how your friendship needs, how they changed during different stages of motherhood.
I feel like, yeah, when had younger kids, I feel like I just needed other moms to talk to and share experiences with and make sure I'm like, am I doing this totally wrong? Just kind of to commiserate and feel like somebody else was there cheering me on in the trenches of motherhood. And then as my kids have gotten older, and it's interesting, as you have slightly older kids, you're not necessarily sharing some of those challenges anymore. Sometimes you are with your really close friends, but sometimes they're your kids' challenges. So you don't, but you want, for me, it's like, I want a group of friends that I can get together with and we can just have fun. And so, like I was saying, that one particular group, or just other moms who maybe are going through teenagers, like that whole navigating all of that, the school stuff, all the emotions and drama, like, just, it's so nice to have a group that can talk about that. I think my needs have changed in the past 2 years because all my kids are in school now, and I'm wanting to do more things. So I have, some stuff that I do for work, but I also am like, now I have some free time to do some fun things or learn some new things or do service. So I feel like nowadays I'm looking for people, like a buddy. I'm looking for somebody to go do those things with. So, like, to go hiking with, or if I want to go downtown and volunteer at the homeless shelter, like, I don't like to do stuff like by myself. I'm a twin. So I think I naturally like to have a buddy. So I'm like, well, who can go with me to the homeless shelter, or an exercise class, or so I think my needs have changed a lot just in having my kids in school, because I'm trying to do all these different things. And so I find friends in different areas. And I think, yeah, that's kind of what I would say, I think.
Yeah, well, and I think, at least for me, again, back to the situational idea, most of my friends, when my kids were younger, were kind of instigated by my kids. Like,
Yeah.
the people that they wanted to play with, I'd make friends with their moms, or, we'd meet at the park with the kids that got along with my kids. And then
Yes.
hopefully I liked the mom as well. And then now that mine are all in school, it's become, I guess, more interest based and less situational and proximity based.
Yes. Yes.
So you get to kind of rediscover your own identity and maybe make friends like you used to in college or high school, where you gravitate to people with similar interests. And it's pretty exciting, actually.
Yes. And there's lots of opportunities to make friends if you look at it that way. And I think some people don't. I think some people stay in this, like, I don't know how to make friends as an adult. It's scary, in this new stage. But if you look at it as, you now have all these opportunities to make friends. Like, you think about, oh, you can volunteer at school on the PTA, and that's a great place to make friends. Or you can do service, or if there's a book club, or I've been doing, with traveling, I've been going on some women's trips for traveling, and I'm meeting people that have similar interests to me, but also that are just, they live all over the world. And that's been kind of cool to see. You're learning different things about yourself, but also other people. So yeah, I really do think it is changing as I kind of move into this next stage a lot.
Yeah. So I want to dig deeper in that women's trip. So you're not talking about like gathering your own friends and going on a trip. You're going on trips with women you don't know?
Yes. So I have done both. So I
Okay.
feel like for the last a couple years ago, a bunch of girls would always go do these like half marathons in different cities. And that was so fun. That's how I've made some of my very best friends, is traveling with people, because you learn different sides of people. And I think it gives you that opportunity to talk, almost like when you're back in college and you're staying up late and like talking about your lives, that you don't get a chance to do in most motherhood experiences, because you're just like running. You're maybe at like a class together for an hour, or you see each other in passing. But yes, I went on 2 different trips. I went on one in April and then one just in September, where I knew the person planning the trip. Like, I'd met them in real life and were friends, but I didn't know anyone else going
Huh.
on the trips. And so it's been interesting because I really have had to use those skills like we were talking about, because all of a sudden you feel like you're that new kid again. and you're like, okay, how do I talk to these people? Like, what things do I bring up? Like, you almost have a list of questions to ask people, like, and you're trying to figure out like how much is too much to share, like in general with friendship,
Yeah.
like you want to share enough, but if you overshare when you first meet someone, it kind of turns them off. So just figuring out those levels of what to share and understanding the social dynamics. So that's been kind of a fun experiment for me because I'm naturally shy, or I feel that way. That's how I've always been. But I've had to push myself out of that. I used to deal with a lot of social anxiety, and I've had to work through a lot of that. And these trips are just like throwing you in to the wolves, and you are just with people. And one trip was like a 4-day trip, and one was a 2-week trip. So 2 weeks of like talking to different
Wow.
people the whole time and being thrown into different experiences. It was a great practice in social skills for sure.
And how many, excuse me, how many women are we talking? How many were in the group?
So the 4-day trip was, I feel like there were 15
Oh,
people,
wow.
15 or 20. So that was a little bit trickier because, and actually, it was tricky and it wasn't. Most of the women didn't know each other, which actually made for an awesome experience because everybody was open to meeting new people. And so you were constantly at dinner, you're sitting with different people. And towards the end, you have people that you navigate more or you feel more connected to. And you ended up spending more time with those people, but you wanted to get to know everybody because everybody had just unique stories. The trip that I just went on to the UK, there were 8 women. So it was a much smaller group, and everyone was generally, interestingly, most of the women were at least in my stage of life. Some have older children. Um, and the interesting thing was they all knew each other. I was the new person to the group.
Okay.
And so I had to kind of figure out how to navigate that, but they were so open and friendly that it made it pretty easy.
Yeah. Do you find that in situations like that, because I've been, just exploring this top idea for a while, and I feel like one of the challenges people keep bringing up is like, it seems like everybody else has their groups and they're not interested in anyone else. Do you do you think that's mostly in our heads? Do you think that's really true? Or do you think we're often like, we just make these assumptions?
I think it definitely goes back to assumptions. In all of the surveying I've done and in most of the research that I've read, most people are open to making new friends and are interested in it. Most people assume other people already have all the friends they need. And so it is like kind of a mind game. And if you were to ask a lot of women in my stage of life, most women that I've talked to want to keep making friends. There's a handful that feel like, and I had a friend say this to me one time. She's like, I don't really want to make any more friends. I already have enough friends. And I just thought, you know what, that is such a limiting belief because there are so many cool and amazing people to meet. Like, why would you want to limit yourself that way? But in that stage of life that she was in, she wasn't open to it. And there may be a few people in that stage, or maybe some people just aren't comfortable creating new groups. So you'll run into some of those people. But for the most part, in most of the women that I've surveyed and that the research I've done has shown is most people want to make more friends and are open to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's very true.
So I think if you go into the situation with that in mind, it makes you stop having some of those kind of thoughts that hold you back. Because if you were to walk into a social situation and say, everyone in this room wants to be my friend, if you tell yourself that, or wants to be friends with, they at least want to get to know me or something. You tell yourself that enough times and you walk into a room, it's different than if you say like, I can tell everybody here seems to be talking to somebody. Everybody seems like they already have friends. The way you walk into that room, then all of a sudden you're like, who do I talk to? Everyone seems to be talking to somebody. And it's a much scarier situation. granted, we as women can also do a better job instigating that and making that clear. Because a lot of times, I love, I think it's Brene Brown that talks about women standing in circles and instead should stand in a horseshoe. Or is that Glennon Doyle? Maybe it's Glennon Doyle, one of the two. But a lot of times when you're talking with your friends, even if you are open to making friends, you stand in a circle and you act like you're talking to each other. And people who don't have as many friends see that and they're like, well, there's not space for me in that group. I've been
Yeah.
in that situation
Yeah.
before, and you're just like, well, it's really scary to walk over to a closed group and try to, like, what do you do? Stand on the outside? Like, it's just awkward, right? So, if alternatively we as women were to stand in horseshoes, is what she says, or make space, then people who don't know us can come over, they can just listen. Someone can say, like, they'll notice you and include you. So I think we as women, sometimes even when we want to make new friends, we don't necessarily show that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And as you were mentioning that, I was picturing some of my friends who have developed the skill that welcomes people. And,
Yeah.
the standing in a horseshoe is a great example, but I have some that, if I'm kind of standing on the outskirts of a circle, I'm picturing this specific time. She just kind of reached her hand out of the circle, put her arm around me. She was talking, so she didn't interrupt her conversation, but she's just so good at it. She just reached her hand and like put it on my shoulder and and then kind of like physically drew me in. And like what a great skill that was and what a welcoming gesture. It made me feel
Oh,
great.
yes. Yes. Well, and I went to this retreat last week and there were 90 women. And it was an intimidating group to be part of. And a lot of the times people are standing in circles and you walk into this room of 90 women who are all talking. And I knew people, but like there are those people that when you walk over to talk, they also do a thing where if they're in the middle of telling a story and then they recognize you might not know any of the details, they stop and fill you in and they give you some backstory. They don't make you feel like an outsider. And I think that's another thing we as women can do. I mean, learning the social skills to make friends include some of that where you're looking, like look around and see who's standing on the outside, who's not included. If somebody's kind of looking awkwardly, like they probably know how to make friends, they just in that situation feel lost. We can do a lot to just recognize that and bring them in. And I think everybody goes through different stages in life when they are the outsider and when they are the person who kind of has the friends. And it's like when you move or when you go to a new activity or different things. So I think if you can remember what it felt like when you were new and what you wish someone had done to help you, and not that I can develop all these great social skills, but sometimes you need someone to give you that opportunity to talk to you or to come over and talk to you or to pull you into a group. I feel like it's good to remember that you were in that stage before and what you wish other people had done and then do that same thing.
Yeah, no, that's great. So what are a few other skills that you can actually just practice and develop to be a good friend?
Um, One of the things that I think is important to do is to work on your self-awareness. So some of that comes down to thinking through, like before you can just start developing skills, you kind of have to figure out what your weaknesses and strengths are. So over time, I feel like I've been able to figure out like, okay, I am good one-on-one. Big group things scare me. So maybe to make myself more comfortable, kind of initiate more one-on-one or small group activities with friends to kind of fine tune some of my skills. I think there are skills like just basic kind of conversation starters you can learn, like, or the kinds of open-ended questions you can ask people. Because the worst thing you can do is start a conversation and ask like a yes or no question and the person's kind of awkwardly like this isn't going to go anywhere and everybody's kind of floundering and trying to figure out like how do we make this conversation work. So I think those are some of the skills you can learn. I think being a good listener is a really good skill to develop. I think a lot of people, um, when they're in groups, they're thinking of what they're going to say next instead of listening to who's talking. And I think if you can really work on slowing down and listening and not trying to come up with a response, maybe sometimes just validating people's experiences rather than sharing a me too experience. I mean, a lot of the way women interact is by sharing similar experiences. That's one of the ways we connect. But if you do it the wrong way, it can feel like you're just one upping each other. I don't know, you've probably had those
Yeah,
situations
for
before where you're
sure.
like, there's a whole difference between the connecting stories and the one upping story. So I think trying to be aware of what things you're doing in a situation, um, facial expressions make a big difference. Um, my dad has Parkinson's, and so he doesn't really smile. And it's interesting when you don't smile, and I've noticed, like, I don't have Parkinson's, but I notice I don't tend towards smiling. I just look serious all the time. And when you're not smiling, people make assumptions about you. So learning to smile, learning to look interested in people, like seem welcoming to people, those are skills you can actually work on, like smiling when somebody comes to the room, saying hi to people, not just putting your eyes down. Like some of those kinds of things can make a big difference. One article I was reading yesterday was talking a lot about smiling and how, and positivity, that people really want to be friends with people who are positive and happy. That doesn't mean you don't have anything wrong with you ever, but people gravitate towards people who are happy and positive. So if they're going to choose to go talk to one person or a different person, I don't know about you, but I'm going to be drawn more towards the person that seems happy, unless it's a friend that's in need and sad and you want to go help them. But generally, people are drawn to people who are happy and excited to see them.
Yeah, and I think it's even more than happy or unhappy. I feel like it's open. You can almost
Yes.
make yourself look open, you know?
Yes.
Like I
Yes.
am I am accepting visitors right now. I'm
It's
open
so
for
true.
business, you know?
Yes. Yes. Because I think if, and especially nowadays when everyone has a phone, one of the things we tend to do when we're in a social situation and we're not sure what to do is people look down on their phone and they start scrolling. And
Yeah.
you think about, like, a long time ago, my mom is the most friendly person you could meet. She makes friends in grocery store lines, at doctor's offices. She still does because she's not there sitting on her phone. But when you're trying to be open and receptive to friends, if you're on your phone, that automatically tells someone that you're busy. And that may not be what you may be nervous, but the impression you give is you're busy and you don't need anybody. And if you really do want friends, you're sending mixed signals to people.
Yeah, yeah, it just made me think of flying on an airplane. I kind of make it a game to read the stranger sitting next to me, and okay, is this the kind of person who wants to chat on the trip or not? And there's lots of cues that you can, I mean, I think everybody kind of knows the social cues on an airplane. If you take your book out right away and kind of turn, you know,
Right, right.
or if you kind of I always kind of I enjoy those kind of small talk. I enjoy just getting to know somebody for that little amount of time. So I usually try to keep myself, and I think of it that way. I keep myself open at the beginning of a flight as we're getting adjusted, and I don't pull things out, and I don't, um, and I just, you know, look around and maybe make just a comment or two, and then just feel them out and see if they want to be by themselves, which I'll totally respect, or if they
Right.
want to engage. And it's just kind of like a fun game for me, actually. um,
And I think that can be applied in so many areas of life, right? Where, like, you walk into any sort of room and you can give off that impression of, I'm excited to learn from people here. I'm excited to be here. I want to get to know you. And I think you can also give off the, I don't want to be here. I don't want to get to know anybody. I'm just going to stand and stay by the wall. You know, like whichever impression you give. So I think you can totally learn those things. It's
Yeah.
not always easy for everyone. I think some people are more prone to one or the other, but you definitely can learn those things.
Yeah. Well, you have given so much advice. Are there things that you've learned from your research that you especially want to communicate to moms who are struggling with having friends?
Um, I guess one thing that I think is just a good reminder, and this isn't necessarily from my research, but is that friends don't magically appear. A lot of times, kind of like when you're like dating and you're like, boys don't magically just disappear that want to marry you or date you. You have to put yourself in situations. And I think with friends, you need to take an active role in friendship. If you are a mom that is sitting home and you have young kids or big kids and you feel like you don't have the friends that you want, you're responsible to do something about it. Nobody else is responsible to do something about it. And I think when you feel empowered to do something about it, then you can do some of the things we talked about, like in terms of developing social skills or putting yourself in situations, finding new situations to make friends. But I think when we sit and wallow in the fact that we're not finding the kind of friends, we look on social media and we scroll and we see, oh, those girls went on a girls' trip. Oh, that person looks like they have a lot of friends. I don't have that same group. When we sit and wallow in that, that doesn't help us. It just makes us feel bad about ourselves. And it means we're not taking any action ourselves. So if you feel that feeling when you're scrolling through, it's a good reminder, like do something about it, take some sort of small action. Um, and I think another thing that I think is good to remember, and my husband and I talk about this a lot when it comes to networking as well in general, is some friends are stepping stones to other friends. Some friends are gatekeepers to other friends. So one of my roommates when I lived in LA was awesome. I loved her. We got along great. We weren't really great friends. We were like roommates. But one of the things she was really good at doing is introducing me to other people. She introduced me to probably most of the guys I dated, all of the friends I had and still have, because she's the kind of person that is really good at making connections and then saying, so and so is really good at this. You should get to know this person. And so I think finding some people like that or being that person, that can help you make friends if you can find those kinds of people. Um, and then I guess the last thing would be is make a list of the things you're looking for in a friend if you're not feeling like you're finding that right now. And then look kind of critically at that list and see what of those things you need to work on.
Ooh,
And
that's
I think a
good.
lot of times, like that gives us the insight into maybe I'm not attracting the kinds of friends I like or finding the kinds of friends I like because I'm not that kind of person. And why would those people want to hang out with me if that's what I want? Sometimes we're putting off multiple things. So I think that's kind of the reflection I was talking about before, where you really need to stop and reflect and see what kind of friend am I? What kind of friend do I want? And see if you're bridging that gap.
Yeah. And then once you realize those deficits or weaknesses, whatever, recognize that I think some people would see that and be like, yeah, well, I guess it's just never meant to be then because that's not who I am. But
Yeah.
really, everything we've talked about, these are all skills, like you said, that can be practiced. And we are not, none of us are static human beings. We are always growing and developing. And I think we can pigeonhole ourselves as much as we pigeonhole other people and not recognize our capacity for growth.
Well, and sometimes when you do that exercise, it makes you reassess, like maybe you see a group of friends and you want to be friends with those people, but once you do that list of like what are you actually looking for, maybe you realize, oh, well that group doesn't really have what I'm looking for, and that's maybe why I'm not connecting with those people. But so and so over here who's been trying to get me to hang out with her, she actually has a lot of those things that I'm looking for. Maybe that would be a better relationship. I think sometimes when we stop and work through that, or think about this, I try to do this exercise regularly when I'm feeling like my friendships need a change. Um, which people are reaching out to me? Because sometimes I feel like I have a lot of one-sided friendships, and I think when I ask people on my Instagram, and I think it also draws people who it draws some interesting people, and a lot of people feel like they're doing all the work in their friendships. And it's interesting. Well, everybody can't be doing all the work in their friendships. So it may be that
Right.
certain friendships you're doing more work, other friends. So, but I think it's good to stop sometimes and think like sometimes you discount the people that are reaching out to you and are doing nice things for you because you're looking to make friends with these people over here or this group or do something different. I think it's good to assess who is trying to make time for me, who is already being a good friend, because sometimes there are people we don't recognize, and that may be worth putting more time into.
Oh, that's beautiful. I really like that. Yeah, I mean, we do mature from those grade school and high school dynamics, but sometimes they still rear their ugly heads,
Yes,
the
yes,
negative ones, those
yes.
kind of like aspirational friendships, or those, you know, friendships for status. How, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous that that can't even be a thing, but it is also human nature, you know?
Well, it is. And you know what has been helpful for me is sometimes when I feel like when I'm having a miss with a certain friend group, is is trying to figure them out a little bit more and talking to them a little bit more and figuring out like what are their friendship goals. And a lot of times the reason why maybe I'm not connecting with somebody is their friendship goals are totally different. Maybe they're creating a friend group because they want their kid, a lot of times it has to do with kids. They want their kid to have a better position on the soccer team, and they're making friends with certain moms. There's a lot of strategy that some moms get into. They're making friends for this reason. And if you are trying to make friends with those moms, you may run into trouble because their goals are totally different. They're not looking for a confidant and a friend to go walking with every day. They, right now, in whatever stage of their life, they have different goals for their friendships. Some people do a lot of networking for their spouses and they're developing friendships that way. I think the more we step back and realize that the way we do friendship is everybody does it differently and everybody has different goals, then when you kind of figure out, well, what are my goals? What are my needs? Then you can usually find people who are more aligned with what you're looking for, because not everybody is, and not everyone is not for you. And I think sometimes we try to force friendships, or we feel like, oh, well, why doesn't these people like me? Or why am I not fitting into this group? Kind of like you're saying, going back, it brings back some of those high school feelings. But a lot of times it's because we have totally different ideas of friendship or different goals. And once we realize that, it makes it much easier to like let go of some of those ideas.
Yeah. No, I love that idea of really articulating your goals. And because I think I have done that at certain times, but I forget. Like I forget that I need to figure out what I'm actually looking for. Like honestly, like so one of my great needs is to find a group of women to talk about ideas with. Like I just
Mm-hmm.
love that process, or the brainstorming. And when I was a young mother, I needed that so badly because I was talking to children all day and I needed to talk to somebody about ideas. So that was why like a book club was indispensable in those years. I
Mm-hmm.
still am part of a book club, but I don't find myself as like, I love the women, everything, but I don't feel the same need, partly because of this podcast. I'm talking to women about
Yes.
ideas all the time. And
Yes.
I still have that need, but it's being filled in a different way. And so book club is good, yes, but what I really need is I need friends. I need workout friends like you were talking about, because I need some motivation there. So sometimes that changes, those needs get filled in different ways. So it's good to continually reassess. It's not like I still have some of the same basic needs. They're just being met in different ways in different stages of life.
Yes. Yes. And you know what? Going back to what you said about the ideas group is a few years ago, one of my girlfriends started, there's a group called Power of Moms.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. You're probably familiar with it, right?
Yeah.
And so they have a structure for creating mom groups. And we created a Power of Moms group a few years ago, and she collected her friends from all different areas of life. And we meet once a month, and we would read articles and talk about them. And it was great. Their curriculum was great. We loved it. But at some point, we went through all of their curriculum, and we still wanted to keep meeting because we had forged these friendships. So we don't meet every month, but we have gone on girls' trips together, and we meet together every couple months now. And we come up with a concept, like there's some idea out there of like something some of us are working on or a topic we want to discuss, and everyone kind of reads an article or brings their favorite podcast. And that's what we do for, I mean, it can go on for a long time. And we just we share life experiences. We share what we've learned. Different people have, different things that they bring. And it really has filled me in a lot of ways in some of those areas, because you have an opportunity to share about some of your struggles. I mean, in the group, we've had so many people go through recently. A lot of family members have passed away, and you're supporting each other. And it's been this kind of small microcosm of a friendship group that came from people all over the place. And now we're supporting each other in different areas of life. And everyone's got different kids at different ages. So when someone's going through one thing, you're like, okay, well, I did that, and here's how I handled it. And it's been really cool to see that you don't necessarily have to have friends in the same stage of life, or even that have the same interests as you, to really have a meaningful conversation, and that you can really support women in different areas of life. Like, it's been such an amazing group for me, but it started from one mom getting this curriculum, telling everyone to pay the monthly fee. And we read articles, and we just talked about these parenting articles. And then it morphed into, I think it's been 5 or 6 years now, maybe longer, that we've been doing it. And it's a tight knit group of friends. And I think there's maybe 12 of us, but not everyone comes every time. And it's been amazing to watch that transformation over the past couple of years.
Yeah. And one interesting thing I've found is that um, often when I'm in a group like that, I've really learned not to trust my first impressions, because
Yes.
there have been so many times where I've been like, oh, I'm going to keep my distance from that person. She seems like a red flag. And then
Yeah.
now we're like dear friends. And I was like, I couldn't have been more wrong about her. And, like, I guess there are times when we should trust our first instincts and our first impressions, but I've been just taught that lesson over and over again, that I'm wrong a lot of the time.
Well, yeah, a lot of times when we make assumptions about people, and a lot of times they're based off of their first impressions, we're totally wrong.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good reminder that people generally also aren't judging us always. I mean, they might be judging us off our first impression, but usually, if you're given enough chance, you also will have that happen with other friends. So it was interesting, though. One thing that I read yesterday, and I think this is just a good general reminder, is that when you're going into situations in general, like when people are stressing about making friends, is people aren't thinking about you most of the time. They're thinking about themselves. And so anytime you're in those situations, and people generally have a positive view of most people. So it's not like, oh, I think that person's really annoying, or, oh, I really like that person. Generally, people have an overall positive view of people. So I think that's a good reminder when you're going into situations and when you're meeting new people. And I do the same thing as what you're saying. I generally have found usually my first impression is wrong. And I've had that lesson taught time and time and again, where they end up being some of my better friends. And it really is just a reminder, stop yourself before you make judgments about
Yeah.
people, because you don't know until you know somebody's story. You really don't know them,
Yeah.
and you really can't judge them.
And
but
that's
it
a
is
skill
hard.
too.
Yes,
Just like any of those, curbing your first impressions is a skill
yes,
too.
it is. It is for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh, well, I have learned so much from talking to you. I'm so glad we connected. I've been following the travel thing, but I didn't know that this other account existed till Heather showed me.
Well,
So,
so it's I'm always like excited to talk about friendship stuff just because it's something that's interesting to me, just like travel is.
yeah.
So it's a fun opportunity to chat.
Thank you so
Awesome.
much. I
Okay,
appreciate
no
it.
problem.
Thank you for tuning in to the Family Lab podcast. I'll include more resources to learn about Elise and follow her recovery in the show notes.